AITA, you're always the last one in line, so there's no seat. I made the call. Delivery man arrived with a luxurious set of sushi and steaks, just for me. Family nibbled on cold pizza, and I savored. Our family has always had this tradition, a big family dinner once a week, every week, without fail. It was one of those things that started so long ago that no one even remembers whose idea it was. It just became a ritual. No matter how busy anyone was, no matter what plans had to be rescheduled, everyone showed up. My parents, my two sisters and their husbands, Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert, a rotating assortment of cousins, sometimes a friend or two if they were around, and even Grandma Mary from down the street, who lived alone and had started coming by so often that she was basically considered part of the family. Someone once asked her why she always showed up, and she just sighed dramatically and said, "It's so lonely at home." After that, nobody questioned her presence anymore. It was chaos, of course. There were never enough tables, never enough chairs, never enough forks that matched, but somehow it all worked. People balanced plates on their knees, sat on footstools, ate with salad forks or chopsticks if all the normal cutlery ran out. Nobody seemed to mind. It was loud, everyone talking over each other, 3 conversations happening at once with people at opposite ends of the room trying to yell jokes to each other. It was messy and disorganized and loud, and for everyone else, it seemed fun. For everyone except me. I don't know exactly when it started, but for several years now I have noticed this weird pattern that I could not unsee once I saw it. No matter when I showed up, no matter how early I arrived or how much I helped, every single seat at the table was already taken by the time I went to sit down. Every time. It did not matter if I had been there all afternoon, peeling potatoes or chopping vegetables, or if I had just walked in the door. It did not matter if I set the table myself or if I literally sat down for a second before getting up to grab a drink. Somehow, like magic, every time I went to sit down, the table was full. And every single time, my mother gave me the same smile, that soft, passive smile that somehow made me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. She would always say, "You're always the last one to come in, so there's no room." And every single time, my plate would already be sitting off to the side on the kitchen counter. Not at the table. Not even close to the table. Just off to the side, where plates go when you're wrapping up leftovers. I never argued. At first, I thought maybe it really was my fault. Maybe I was bad at timing. Maybe I got distracted and wandered off too long. But after the 5th, 6th, 20th time, I realized it didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter if I was the first one there or if I set the table or if I physically put my plate down in front of a chair before anyone else even arrived. Somehow, there was always a full table, and somehow, I was always the one left out. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't even complain. I just nodded every time, picked up my plate, and went to sit on the couch with my food balanced on my knees, trying to find a space to eat where no one would trip over me. I told myself it was fine. I told myself it was just how things were in big families. I told myself it was not a big deal. But last week, something shifted. I don't know what it was, maybe it was the fact that I had literally spent all day cooking. I had been there before anyone else, helping my mom prep vegetables, rolling out dough for some half-baked attempt at homemade garlic knots, and cleaning up after the inevitable flour explosion when my cousin's toddler decided the dough was Play-Doh. I had set the table myself, every single fork, knife, and mismatched napkin. I had even put my own plate down at a spot, just to see if it made a difference. It didn't. Somehow, when it was time to eat, every seat was taken again. My plate was back on the counter, and my mother, with that same smile, said, "You're always the last one to come in, so there's no room." I didn't nod this time. I didn't say anything. I just walked over to the couch, set my plate down, and picked up my phone. I wasn't even hungry for what was on my plate, some sad pile of cold pizza slices, half-smashed breadsticks, and a lonely scoop of pasta salad someone had clearly dropped onto my plate as an afterthought. The longer I stared at it, the more I realized how tired I was of all of it. The noise, the mess, the feeling of being invisible in a room full of people who were supposed to be my family. So I ordered dinner. Not just dinner, a feast. I scrolled through my favorite delivery app and built a meal fit for a queen. Premium sushi with the fancy tuna and avocado rolls I never let myself splurge on. A perfectly marbled beef steak, medium rare, with garlic butter and rosemary potatoes. Lobster in this thick, creamy sauce, the kind you only order when you are celebrating something, or, apparently, when you are reclaiming your dignity at a family dinner. I even got an extra dessert, just because I could. I didn't rush. I didn't care if anyone saw me ordering. I just sat there, calmly building my feast, while everyone else munched on lukewarm pizza and argued about who forgot to bring drinks this time. It took about 30 minutes for the food to arrive, and it was worth every second. I spread everything out on the coffee table in front of the couch, laid it out like a personal buffet, and turned on my favorite comfort show, the one I never get to watch in peace because someone is always shouting over it about fantasy football or the latest drama at Aunt Linda's job. I took my time eating. No one elbowed me in the ribs. No one interrupted me to ask if I had heard about Cousin Connor's new girlfriend or Grandma Mary's latest conspiracy theory about the mailman. No one stole food off my plate or reached across me for the salt or accidentally knocked my drink over with their flailing hands. It was just me, my perfect meal, my show, and complete, glorious silence. I was so at peace that I didn't even notice at first that the room had gone quiet. When I finally looked up, I realized they were all staring at me. Every single one of them. They were sitting there with their cold pizza and their lukewarm pasta salad, and they couldn't take their eyes off my sushi rolls, my steak, my lobster tail, my slow, deliberate carving of each perfect bite. Uncle Robert, ever the opportunist, asked if he could try the tail. I smiled and said, sure, as soon as there's a seat at the table. He said nothing. It was the best family dinner I've ever had. Update 1. A week passed, and I honestly thought nothing of it. I assumed that last week's little personal rebellion, my feast on the couch, was a one-off. A glitch in the matrix. A momentary indulgence born out of frustration that would not need to be repeated. After all, I had made my point, right? I figured everyone would have laughed about it afterwards, maybe chalked it up to me being in a mood, the way families do when they do not want to actually address something directly. I told myself the next dinner would be back to normal, chaotic, messy, mildly irritating, but normal. I was wrong. I showed up on time, just like before. Not early enough to be the first one there, because I had finally accepted there was no prize for that, but not late enough to warrant the last one in excuse. The house was already loud when I walked in, the clatter of plates being moved around, the sound of Aunt Linda's too loud laugh cutting over some story about her latest online shopping haul, the general hum of too many voices all talking at once, none of them really listening to each other. It was familiar, and in a weird way, a little comforting. I helped out where I could, not that anyone noticed. I brought in a bag of ice because someone always forgets it. I rearranged the half-hearted buffet of mismatched dishes spread across the kitchen island, making sure at least one serving spoon was in each bowl. I even stacked the plastic cups near the sink because someone always asks where they are 5 minutes into the meal. It was the usual pre-dinner chaos, and I settled into it like muscle memory. But then it was time to eat, and there it was again. Every single seat at the table was already taken. The same overcrowded scene as always, chairs squeezed together so tightly you could barely pull them out without elbowing someone. There was the usual assortment of people balancing plates on their knees, side conversations layered on top of each other, someone already passing around a bottle of cheap wine with a paper napkin wrapped around the neck to catch the drips. And my plate, of course, was already on the counter. That damn counter. It was not even an act of malice at this point. It was just tradition, muscle memory for everyone else the way it had become for me. My plate didn't belong at the table, it belonged off to the side, waiting for me to take it to the couch. Like I was some guest who showed up late instead of someone who had been there all along. No one even commented on it anymore. It was just how it was. But this time, something was different. My usual spot on the couch, the corner where I always ended up, balancing my plate on the armrest and trying to block out the noise, was already taken. My cousin Connor, of all people, was sprawled there, his plate balanced precariously on one knee, already halfway through his second slice of pizza. Connor, the same cousin who always had some new story about a startup he was working on, some app idea that was going to change the game, stories that would get dropped halfway through because someone else at the table always had something louder or more ridiculous to say. Without even looking up, Connor glanced at me and said, "And I thought you always sit on the couch." It was not a joke. It was not malicious. It was just a fact to him. The same way you might comment that the sky is blue or that Grandma Mary always brings her own tea bags because she does not trust anyone else's kettle. It was a simple, offhand comment that locked me into place in his head, the family member who didn't have a seat at the table, who just belonged on the couch. I stood there for a second, my plate in my hand, that tight smile already curling at the corners of my mouth, the one I always wore when I wanted to scream but knew it would not make a difference. And then, with the kind of calm that only comes after years of resignation, I set my plate back down on the counter, pulled out my phone, and started building my order. This time, I didn't hesitate. I knew exactly what I wanted, and I was going to make it count. A premium sushi platter, the kind they only put together for special events. A perfectly cooked duck breast, seared and glazed, with a side of truffle mashed potatoes that cost more than an entire pizza. And because why not, I added a bottle of champagne. Not sparkling wine, not Prosecco, actual champagne, the kind that comes in a heavy bottle with a satisfying pop. And just to top it all off, I ordered a dessert sampler, a ridiculous assortment of mini cheesecakes, fruit tarts, chocolate soufflés, and a crème brûlée that I already knew I was going to crack with my spoon in the most obnoxious way possible. The food took a while to arrive, of course, but I didn't mind. I sat in the armchair instead, my phone in my hand, while the rest of the family carried on around me. They were loud and messy and completely unaware of the storm brewing under my skin. I could hear my mother's voice rise above the others every now and then, doing her usual half-hearted attempts to keep things organized. I could hear Aunt Linda loudly discussing some new detox cleanse she was on, her voice muffled every time someone passed in front of her. And through it all, I could feel the growing awareness of my silence. I was there, but I wasn't there, and that silence was starting to itch at the edges of the table. When the food arrived, it was everything I wanted and more. The sushi was perfect, the duck was tender, and the champagne was so cold it sent a little shock through my teeth with every sip. I laid everything out on the coffee table, my personal feast framed in the glow of the television, the dessert sampler proudly on display like some obscene trophy. I took my time with every bite, cutting into the duck so slowly it felt ceremonial, popping the champagne cork with a flourish that I knew they could all hear over the noise of their own conversations. It didn't take long before I felt the weight of their stares. One by one, they started to notice, their eyes flicking over to my spread and then back to their paper plates and lukewarm pasta salad. No one said anything, but the whispering started, low murmurs passed from one side of the table to the other, heads leaning in together, quick glances in my direction before looking away again. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was embarrassment, the quiet realization that my dinner looked better than theirs, that my meal had turned their chaotic family tradition into something small and cheap by comparison. I could feel my mother's eyes on me the longest, her smile just a little too tight, her voice a little too bright as she tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground. But after dinner, when most of the plates had been cleared and the first few goodbyes were starting, she pulled me aside. Not directly, of course. Just a casual hand on my arm, a gentle tug to the side, her voice soft and full of forced concern as she tried to hint that I could share next time. I didn't even pause. I didn't argue or explain or smile my way through it. I just looked her in the eye and said I would share the table seat when it was left for me. Update 2. A few weeks passed, and in that time, the atmosphere around the weekly family dinners began to shift in a way I could almost taste. It was subtle at first, shorter conversations with me during the week, fewer messages in the family group chat asking if I was bringing anything or what time I was arriving. I knew the silence wasn't accidental. It had the weight of people avoiding eye contact, the quiet hum of family members talking about you without including you. It didn't sting the way it might have once. At this point, it was all just background noise to me. The next dinner I showed up for, I noticed the difference before I even stepped fully inside. The air felt charged, that artificial cheerfulness that families put on when they are waiting for someone to react to something they think is hilarious. I could hear the muffled snickering before I saw anything, the kind of giggling that's half nerves, half anticipation, the way kids laugh when they know they are about to get in trouble but haven't quite decided if the joke is worth it. I walked into the dining room and there it was, a seat, reserved just for me. Dead center at the table, surrounded by a dozen mismatched chairs, was a single folding high chair. The kind meant for toddlers, all wobbling metal legs and scuffed plastic, the seat slightly sticky in that way things get when they've been in a family garage for too many years. Balanced on the back was a piece of cardboard, hastily torn from a box of soda cans, with the words, "For VIP," scrawled across it in uneven permanent marker. It was their joke. Their way of showing they had heard me, that they were oh so aware of the seating issue. It was their version of a peace offering, dipped in sarcasm and wrapped in condescension, presented with that thin veneer of plausible deniability. If I laughed, I was part of the joke. If I got upset, they would just say I couldn't take a joke and it was all in good fun. They all sat there, waiting, eyes flicking between me and the chair, waiting to see if I would play along. Some of them were already grinning, like they were proud of themselves for being so clever. Others were holding back, not entirely sure how far this would go. My mother had that familiar tight smile on her face, the one that said she didn't totally approve but also wasn't about to step in and ruin the family's fun. The room was thick with it, the expectation, the performance, the desperate hope that this would be the moment I laughed and let it all go. I didn't say a word. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. I turned around, walked straight past the table, out through the back door, and stepped into the garden. The air was cooler than I expected, that late evening chill settling in, but it felt cleaner than the stale, crowded air inside. The garden had always been my escape hatch during these dinners, the one place I could breathe without bumping into someone or getting caught in the orbit of a conversation I had no interest in joining. I pulled out my phone, opened my delivery app, and built myself a new order. This time, I didn't bother with subtlety or restraint. I went straight for the good stuff, the kind of barbecue that made your fingers slick with sauce before you even picked up a rib. Smoked brisket with that perfect pink ring around the edges, ribs coated in a thick, glistening glaze, grilled corn still wrapped in husks, butter dripping down the sides. It wasn't just dinner, it was a declaration. A private banquet, held outside their little circle, just far enough away that they could see every bite but couldn't touch a single one. The order came faster than I expected, or maybe time just passed differently outside, away from the noise and the forced laughter. I spread it all out on the porch, the boxes steaming in the cool air, the smell of hickory smoke curling up into the sky. I didn't even bother with plates, I just sat on the porch steps, my feast spread out in front of me, my fingers already sticky with sauce before I even took my first bite. Inside, the laughter stumbled and faltered. At first, they tried to carry on like nothing was happening, like the sight of me on the porch with my ribs and my brisket was not pulling their attention like a magnet. They tried to lean back into their own conversation, but it was forced now, every laugh a little too loud, every story a little too exaggerated, like they were performing for each other instead of actually talking. But no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't stop looking at me. I could feel their eyes through the window, the way they kept glancing over like they were trying to figure out if they were still in on the joke or if the joke had somehow slipped out of their hands and landed squarely in mine. My ribs were better than their pizza. My brisket smelled better than their whatever salad someone threw together last minute. And I knew it, and they knew it, and it settled over the dinner table like a weighted blanket no one wanted to acknowledge. Aunt Linda cracked first. She always did. Aunt Linda, whose entire personality was built around whatever diet she was on that week, who always claimed she was too full after one slice of cucumber but could never resist hovering near the snack table, just to see. She drifted out onto the porch like she had just been taking a casual walk, her hands stuffed into her cardigan pockets like she had nothing else to do, her eyes locked firmly on the ribs in my hand. She tried small talk first, the way she always did, asking about my job or my apartment or whether I had heard about some distant cousin's engagement. But her eyes never left my food. Every time I picked up another piece of brisket, her tongue darted out over her lips, just the barest flicker, like she could taste it in the air. She edged closer, her voice soft and casual, and then she asked if I wanted to share. I didn't even look at her when I answered. I just kept my eyes on the ribs, my fingers slick with sauce, my mouth still full as I said I would be happy to share if she wanted to bring me a normal chair. Her smile froze, her hand halfway to her pocket, and she stood there for just a second too long, like her brain needed an extra beat to process what I had said. Then she turned, her cardigan swinging around her legs, and walked back inside without a word. She left, but never came back. Update 3. Last week, I made a decision I probably should have made a long time ago. I skipped family dinner altogether. No excuses, no vague texts saying I might be late, no polite apologies about work running over or errands keeping me tied up. I just didn't show up. I wanted to see what would happen, if anyone would notice, if anyone would care, if the absence of the person they had spent so much time pushing to the edge of the room would register at all. The silence was deafening. Not a single message, not a single missed call. The family group chat kept rolling along, full of blurry photos of half-eaten food, blurry selfies of cousins making faces, blurry shots of Grandma Mary dozing off in her corner of the couch, like always. As if I had never even been a part of it. For a second, I thought maybe they hadn't even noticed I was gone. The dinners were so big, so chaotic, it was easy to imagine they had just assumed I was somewhere else in the house. Maybe they thought I was out back in the garden again, or grabbing something from the car. But late that night, after the dinner must have wound down, after the leftovers were stuffed into mismatched containers and everyone had scattered back to their lives, I got a single message. Not from my parents, not from my sisters, not even from Aunt Linda who had always been so concerned about sharing with me. It was from my cousin Zach, someone I barely even remembered was part of the family, the kind of cousin who shows up twice a year, stands in the corner with a beer, and never says more than 3 words unless someone asks him a direct question. His message was short, casual, and so absurd it actually made me laugh out loud. "Dude, where did you order that cool sushi last time?" That was it. No, hey, we missed you, no, are you okay, not even a half-hearted joke about me being the family recluse. Just a request for a restaurant recommendation, like I was some lifestyle influencer whose only contribution to the family was my taste in takeout. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started digging. The family group chat might have ignored my absence, but it didn't take long to figure out what had been happening while I was gone. My little food rebellions, the sushi, the steak, the barbecue, had left a mark. More than a mark, actually. They had started a full-blown culinary arms race. It started small, with Aunt Linda, of all people. The same Aunt Linda who once loudly declared she didn't trust raw fish and who had spent entire dinners dissecting the mercury content of tuna rolls was the one who apparently showed up to the next dinner with a massive sushi platter from the fanciest spot in town. Not the usual grocery store sushi with limp rice and neon orange spicy mayo, but real sushi, the kind served on wooden boards with tiny delicate flowers as garnish. She brought it in like a trophy, dramatically peeling back the plastic lid so everyone could admire her spontaneous contribution. Not to be outdone, Uncle Robert showed up the week after with lobsters. Whole lobsters, claws and all, gleaming red like some ridiculous centerpiece in a seafood commercial. He made a big show of cracking the claws at the table, juice spraying onto someone's paper napkin, while the usual pizza and pasta salad were pushed further and further to the edge of the table. Someone, no one even remembers who, ordered an entire Korean barbecue spread the week after that, tabletop grill, marinated meats, dipping sauces, and all. They couldn't even figure out how to set it up properly, and at least 3 cousins got minor burns trying to cook their own food at the table, but it didn't matter. The point wasn't practicality. It was spectacle. It was one-upping whatever I had done, even though I wasn't even there to see it. They turned family dinner into a culinary Cold War, escalating week after week, each person trying to outshine the last. The regular meals, the cheap pizzas, the half-hearted trays of pasta someone made just to say they brought something, disappeared entirely. It was all about who could show up with the most outrageous, Instagram-worthy dish. They didn't even seem to notice that the person who started the whole thing wasn't there anymore. And me? I spent that night at home, sitting on my couch with a cat curled up in my lap, ordering a perfectly ordinary pizza from the place down the street. No fanfare, no flourishes, no elaborate platters designed to impress anyone. Just a simple, greasy pizza, delivered in a cardboard box with a slightly too long receipt stapled to the top. I didn't even bother with plates, just ate straight from the box, the cheese stretching between slices in long, gooey threads, the pepperoni slightly curled at the edges just the way I liked. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of my favorite movie playing in the background, the kind of movie I had seen so many times I barely needed to watch it to follow along. The cat purred, the pizza was hot, and for the first time in years, I ate a family dinner where I wasn't elbowed, interrupted, overlooked, or turned into the punchline of a joke I hadn't agreed to. I didn't miss the chaos. I didn't miss the crowded table, the constant competition for attention, the forced cheerfulness covering up the unspoken resentments bubbling just beneath the surface. I didn't miss pretending to laugh at jokes I had heard a dozen times before, or listening to the same tired arguments about who forgot to bring drinks, or dodging awkward questions about my job or my love life from relatives who barely remembered what I did for a living. I didn't miss any of it. I thought back to all those dinners where I sat on the couch with a plate balanced on my knees, trying to convince myself it didn't matter that there was no seat for me at the table. I thought about the folding high chair, the VIP sign, the quiet expectation that I would swallow the joke and let them all off the hook. I thought about the way they had turned my food into a competition, all while pretending I was the one overreacting. Then I took another bite of pizza, leaned back against the couch, and scratched the cat behind the ears. This was the best family dinner I've ever been to.